You think you know what just happened? You think this is just another wrestling storyline, just another corporate power play in the WWE universe? Let me tell you something right now, and I need you to listen carefully because what I'm about to reveal is going to shake everything you thought you understood about professional wrestling to its absolute core. What Roman Reigns just did doesn't just change the game. It obliterates everything we thought we knew about power, loyalty, and control in professional wrestling. And Paul Heyman, the wise man himself, just broke his silence, and what he said is going to make your blood boil with rage and disbelief. But here's what's really going to make you angry, what's going to keep you up at night thinking about the implications of this seismic shift in power. The WWE knew this was coming. They saw the signs. They watched Roman orchestrate every single move like a chess grandmaster playing against amateurs, and they did absolutely nothing to stop it. Why? Because ratings? Because merchandise sales? Because international expansion? Because stock prices? Because Roman Reigns is the vision now, and there's not a single person in that locker room, not a single executive in Stamford, Connecticut, not a single board member who has the guts to stand up and say no to the tribal chief. And you know what the worst part is? We're all complicit in this takeover. Every time we tune in, every time we chant his name, every time we acknowledge him, every time we buy his merchandise, we're feeding the machine that just consumed the very soul of WWE and transformed it into something completely different from what it was just a few years ago. So before you click away, before you scroll to the next video in your feed, before you dismiss this as just another wrestling channel trying to get clicks with sensational headlines, ask yourself this fundamental question that will determine how you view professional wrestling from this moment forward. Are you ready to hear the unfiltered truth about what Roman Reigns taking over the vision really means for the future of sports entertainment? Are you prepared to understand why Paul Heyman's words weren't just another promo, weren't just another scripted segment, but a declaration of war against the old guard, against the traditional power structures, against everything WWE used to represent? Because once you hear this, once you understand the full scope of what's happening behind the scenes and in front of our eyes, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to being a casual fan who thinks this is all just scripted entertainment designed to sell tickets and network subscriptions. This is real power. This is real control. This is real influence that extends beyond the squared circle and into the boardrooms where actual decisions about WWE's future are being made. And Roman Reigns just became untouchable in a way that no performer in wrestling history has ever achieved. Let's start with what actually happened. Because the mainstream wrestling media, the dirt sheets, the podcasters, they're all already spinning this into some feel-good story about evolution and legacy and the natural progression of a top star. Roman Reigns didn't just take over the vision like some corporate executive getting a promotion. He systematically dismantled every power structure that existed in WWE, piece by piece, person by person, alliance by alliance, until there was nobody left standing who could challenge his authority or question his decisions. Think about it carefully and trace the timeline back. When Roman returned at SummerSlam years ago and aligned with Paul Heyman in what seemed like a shocking betrayal of everything he represented as the big dog, people thought it was just a heel turn. Just another bad guy doing bad guy things to get heat from the crowd and sell some pay-per-views. But that was level one of a plan so intricate, so methodical, so brilliantly conceived that by the time anyone realized what was happening, it was already too late to stop the momentum. He didn't just win championships and break records. Championships are props. Titles are accessories. Roman won minds. He won loyalty from people who should have been his enemies. He won fear from those who thought they were untouchable. And most importantly, he won the respect and trust of the one group whose opinion matters more than anyone else in that company. The decision makers, the power brokers, the people who actually control WWE's direction and destiny. The Bloodline wasn't just a faction like D-Generation X or The Shield or Evolution. It was a hostile takeover disguised as family business, hidden behind the cultural significance of Samoan wrestling heritage. Every member Roman brought in, every ally he made through persuasion or intimidation, every enemy he destroyed both physically and psychologically. It was all calculated with precision that would make military strategists envious. Jey Uso, broken down mentally and emotionally through months of psychological warfare, then rebuilt in Roman's image as the loyal enforcer. Jimmy Uso, brought to heel after resisting, after trying to save his brother, after believing family came before business. Solo Sikoa, a weapon pointed at anyone who dares dissent, an enforcer who doesn't question orders. And Sami Zayn? That whole storyline wasn't about redemption or finding family or an outsider being accepted. It was Roman showing the entire world that he could take an outsider. Someone with no Samoan blood, someone who had no business being in the bloodline, and make him believe so completely in the tribal chief's vision that Sami was willing to sacrifice everything. Willing to turn on lifelong friends, willing to compromise his own values. And when Sami finally broke free after months of manipulation, Roman didn't even flinch. Because that was part of the plan too. Show everyone what happens when you betray the vision. Show everyone that even your closest allies are expendable if they don't fall in line. Show everyone that the tribal chief's power isn't diminished by losing soldiers, it's reinforced by making examples of traitors. But taking over the vision goes deeper than the bloodline storyline. It goes deeper than championships and main events and WrestleMania moments. Roman Reigns has done something that no wrestler in the modern era has accomplished. Something that even legends like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and John Cena never quite achieved. He's made himself essential to WWE's very existence, woven himself so deeply into the fabric of the company that removing him would unravel everything. Think about every major storyline in the past 3 years. Every WrestleMania moment that trended worldwide on social media. Every record-breaking gate that had wrestling journalists scrambling to report the numbers. Every time WWE's stock price jumped and investors celebrated. Roman Reigns was at the center of it all, the sun around which everything else orbited. He became so valuable, so integral to the company's success both domestically and internationally, that he transcended being just a performer. He became the product itself. He became synonymous with WWE in a way that blurs the line between character and company. And once you become the product, once you become so synonymous with success that removing you would crash the entire system and send investors running, you don't just have power. You are power. You become untouchable. You become inevitable. Now let's talk about Paul Heyman speaking out, because this is where things get absolutely nuclear and the implications become truly terrifying for everyone else in that company. Paul Heyman is not just a manager standing ringside holding a title. He's not just a mouthpiece cutting promos. Paul Heyman is the greatest strategist in professional wrestling history, a man whose understanding of the business, the psychology, the politics runs deeper than almost anyone alive. This is a man who built ECW from nothing but passion and credit cards, who was the architect of Brock Lesnar's dominance and aura of invincibility, who has survived every corporate regime change, every backstage political war, every attempt by jealous colleagues to push him aside. Paul Heyman has seen it all, done it all, manipulated it all. And Paul Heyman just went on record, looked directly into the camera with that knowing smirk, and essentially told the entire WWE universe that everything we've watched for the past 3 years was exactly what he and Roman planned from day one. Not scripted by creative teams in conference rooms. Not dictated by corporate suits worried about demographics and sponsors. Planned by them. Executed by them with precision. And now, with Roman taking over the vision, it's their world and everyone else is just living in it, hoping to catch whatever scraps fall from the tribal chief's table. Here's what Paul Heyman said that should terrify every single person in that locker room. From the main eventers to the rookies still trying to figure out how to cut a promo. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here because the exact words are almost too brazen to believe, that Roman Reigns doesn't answer to WWE anymore. WWE answers to Roman Reigns. The hierarchy has completely inverted. Let that sink in for a moment. The tribal chief has leveraged his position, his drawing power, his cultural impact, his international appeal, his merchandise sales, his social media influence, to the point where he's essentially running the creative direction of the company from the top of the card. He decides when he works and when he doesn't. He decides who he faces and who isn't worthy of his time. He decides what the vision for WWE's future looks like and who fits into that vision. And here's the kicker that makes this entire situation even more complicated. WWE management is perfectly fine with this arrangement because Roman makes them obscene amounts of money. Lots and lots of it. Revenue streams they didn't even know existed until Roman opened them up. But this creates a dangerous precedent that could haunt WWE for decades to come. When one performer has this much power, when one person can essentially veto creative decisions, dictate terms of his contract, reshape storylines midstream, and redirect the entire direction of a billion-dollar publicly traded company, what happens to everyone else trying to make a living in that locker room? What happens to the young talent trying to break through the glass ceiling that Roman has made even thicker? What happens to the veterans who've given their bodies, their health, their relationships to this business for decades? They become supporting players in Roman's story. They become extras in the tribal chief's vision. They become enhancement talent with better contracts. And that should make you angry. Not at Roman. Understand me clearly here. He's doing exactly what any smart performer with leverage would do. He's maximizing his position, protecting his interests, ensuring his legacy, securing his family's future for generations. Be angry at the system that allows one person to accumulate this much unchecked power without any real counterbalance. You want to know why Cody Rhodes' story became so compelling to fans desperate for someone to challenge Roman's dominance? Because it represented the last real threat to Roman's total control over the vision. Cody was the one person with enough star power from his work outside WWE, enough fan support from his underdog journey, enough credibility from his family legacy to potentially dethrone the tribal chief and shift the vision back to something more democratic, more meritocratic, more accessible to other talents. But even that story, even that supposed challenge to Roman's authority, played out exactly how the tribal chief wanted it to, according to those paying attention. Whether Cody wins or loses in their inevitable collision, whether he eventually takes the title or not, he's doing it on Roman's timeline under Roman's terms, as part of Roman's overarching vision for his legacy. That's the level of control we're talking about. That's how deep the manipulation goes. Paul Heyman speaking out wasn't just another promo in a long line of great Paul Heyman promos. It was a message, a declaration, a warning to everyone in WWE. It was a message to the boys in the back, grinding every night, that there's a new hierarchy, and Roman sits at the top of it, like a king on a throne made of broken careers. It was a message to the executives nervous about losing control that the tribal chief's power is absolute and resistance is futile. And most importantly, it was a message to us, the fans who invest our time and money and emotional energy into this product, that we're watching history being written in real time. Not the scripted, predetermined history of wrestling storylines that we all know are fake, but actual history of a performer becoming so dominant, so essential, so powerful that he reshapes an entire industry around himself and his vision of what it should be. And here's where it gets really controversial, where opinions split and arguments begin. Some of you are probably thinking this is actually great for WWE. Roman Reigns is the best thing that's happened to the company in years. The ratings are consistently up. The matches are incredible 5-star classics. The storytelling is compelling and layered. The business is thriving financially, and you're not wrong about any of that. But at what cost? At the cost of an entire generation of talent living in Roman's shadow, knowing they'll never reach his level? At the cost of creative freedom becoming creative compliance with whatever the tribal chief approves? At the cost of WWE becoming less of a wrestling company showcasing diverse talents and more of a Roman Reigns empire with wrestling happening around him as background noise? This is the same pattern we've seen before in wrestling history, repeated like a curse the industry can't break. Hulk Hogan in the 80s and 90s controlling creative and burying young talent. Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock in the Attitude Era being so big that everyone else felt small. John Cena in the 2000s and 2010s being so omnipresent that fan backlash became inevitable. One person becomes so big, so dominant, so central to everything that the entire company revolves around them like planets around the sun. And every single time, without exception, it eventually leads to stagnation. It eventually leads to fan backlash and rebellion. It eventually leads to the company scrambling desperately to create new stars when their megastar either leaves for Hollywood, retires due to injury, or loses their mystique through overexposure. But Roman Reigns has learned from all of those examples. He studied the patterns. He's not just being pushed by management. He's not just being given everything on a silver platter. He's taking it. He's building it brick by brick. He's making himself so indispensable that WWE has no choice. No alternative but to let him run the show however he sees fit. Paul Heyman's words confirmed what many of us suspected. What the smart fans whispered about but didn't want to believe was actually happening. This isn't temporary. This isn't a phase that will pass when the next hot storyline comes along. Roman Reigns taking over the Vision is the new normal, the new reality, the new foundation upon which WWE is being rebuilt. And whether you love it with passionate intensity or hate it with burning rage, whether you think it's the best thing ever for the business or the worst thing possible for long-term health, you have to acknowledge one undeniable truth that transcends opinion. We are all witnessing something that has never happened before in professional wrestling's long and storied history. We're witnessing a performer in real time becoming bigger than the company itself, not through controversy or scandal, not through walking out or playing politics backstage or threatening to go to the competition, but through pure, undeniable excellence in the ring combined with strategic brilliance and political maneuvering that would make Machiavelli himself proud and maybe even a little jealous. So what happens next? That's the question everyone's asking. The question keeping wrestling fans up at night debating on social media. Does someone eventually rise up to challenge Roman's control over the Vision? Does a unified locker room band together? Does WWE management eventually realize they've created a monster they can't control and can't contain? Does the locker room rebel against the new order? Does fan sentiment shift dramatically when people get tired of Roman's dominance? Or does Roman Reigns continue his reign of dominance for years to come? Possibly decades, cementing himself not just as the greatest of this generation, but as the most powerful, most influential performer in wrestling history who changed how business is done? Paul Heyman seems to think the latter. And if Paul Heyman thinks it, if the wise man has spoken and declared that Roman's takeover is complete and irreversible, then maybe it's time we all acknowledge the tribal chief not just as a character on television, but as the single most influential force in professional wrestling today and possibly ever. This isn't about whether you're Team Roman or Team Cody or Team anyone else trying to break through. This transcends fanboy debates and internet arguments. This is about recognizing that the landscape of professional wrestling has fundamentally changed forever. Power dynamics have shifted completely. The old rules don't apply anymore. And Roman Reigns, with Paul Heyman orchestrating brilliantly from the shadows, has successfully executed the greatest power play in modern wrestling history. They didn't just take over the Vision. They became the Vision. And everyone else, from the main eventers to the mid-carders to the executives to us fans watching at home, we're all just living in it, hoping to find our place in the tribal chief's world.